In a mansion, a boy wondered what it was like to be able to see. After all, everyone told him so. That she couldn't see, then a man tells him that being able to see colors and shapes is a blessing. But unfortunately, the boy's eyes are part of the scar left by the holy knight Histoa. However, the man emphasizes that it is a blessing and that the boy should be proud. But the boy listens to the maids pitying him, and he wonders why he is so pitiful. Could it be because of his eyesight? Then one of the maids calls him Kunin and informs him that it's time for his magic lesson with his teacher. And so the boy goes along the path being guided by the maid. The maid tries to cheer him up by saying that few people manage to learn magic, but the boy tells her that it's pointless since he has to be carried everywhere by someone. And after a long journey through the mansion, Kunin meets her new magic teacher named Jenny. A little later, Kunin is following his teacher's instructions and creates a floating water bubble. However, the boy doesn't even know what he created. The teacher then tells him he created a water bubble the size of an eye and quickly apologizes, reminding him that he is blind. But in the middle of that class, the boy had an epiphany, realizing that he could create the vision using magic. A little later, the boy is eating a sandwich, and as he tries to understand the texture of its components, the poor thing opens the sandwich and everything falls to the floor. But he doesn't care and continues exploring his curiosity about how things are. And so the maid begins to tell him what each thing he picks up is. And with each thing, the boy learns a new shape. However, he tells the maid that he is smelling a lot of things and asks if she hasn't exaggerated. But she tells him that it was worth every minute and encourages the boy to eat. Then she picks up a grape and starts rubbing it in his face, jokingly asking what it is. But the boy says he'll tell her to lower her salary, and the joke ends. And now his history teacher asks him what he wants to study. And to her surprise, he asks for the story of the Knight of Histoa. And although hesitant, the teacher agrees and only tells him to let her know if he feels unwell. And with that, it is revealed that long ago a war raged across the continent until the hero Histoa successfully defeated the demon lord, though he lost his arm and other injuries as a consequence of the battle. And since that time, Histoa's descendants have been children born lacking something. And despite this, people consider these children to be the return of the hero. But Kunin doesn't care about that and is determined to master his magical power to create a magic that allows him to see. However, the boy ends up fainting from exhaustion, and when he wakes up he says that there's still a long way to go. And with that, the maid jokes about whether her love isn't enough. But the boy says that's not the case. However, the maid jokes saying that she's happy because she dedicated herself a lot to him, and that if that wasn't enough, the only thing she could do is for them to start sleeping together in natural striker. Isn't that right? And so the boy goes on to say that he lacks physical and magical knowledge and that he is very behind. But the maid tells him that he is only 7 years old and that he is on schedule. However, the boy's ambition does not allow it. So she suggests he practice sword fighting since he can't run. So the maid, whose name is Aiko, goes after a master swordsman. And already in the garden, Kunin is learning how to move a sword. And so he learns that the movement first comes from the shoulder, then goes to the elbows until it reaches the wrist. At that moment, Professor Jenny arrives and is surprised to see the boy practicing fencing. After exchanging a few words with him, she realizes how determined he is to master magic. And in the blink of an eye, Kunin releases several bubbles that he has mastered, which makes the teacher disbelieve him. After all, she only taught him once, and with that, she concludes that he is frighteningly talented. And not far from there, Mirika, the protagonist's fiancé, is reluctant to go see him. After all, according to her, the boy always has a sad face. However, the maid says it's an order from the king and that she must obey. Once inside the carriage, Mirika realizes that Kunin bears the hero's scars, making him precious to the kingdom of Huglia. She then understands it is her duty to proceed with the political marriage. Then the girl remembered when she used to walk with him, and she asked him what he liked to do for fun. But the boy, completely unenthusiastic, told her nothing. After all, he couldn't do anything on his own. She was disheartened at the thought of having to see his gloomy face for the rest of her life. However, upon entering the residence, she is surprised by the smiling young man who welcomes her and calls her Princess Mirika. This left the girl speechless, and she asked him what was wrong. He then told her that he had grown fond of magic, and in a fraction of a second he shows her the water magic he was learning, which surprised her. But like a true charmer, he transforms the water bubble into an incredible rainbow, leaving the girl completely enchanted. And on top of that, he apologizes to her for always bothering her, which completely changed the girl's expression, who also apologizes to him. Then Kunin extends his hand and asks the girl to listen to him. After all, he has many things he's excited to talk about. And at the end of the afternoon, Mirika is in her carriage, completely enchanted by the pleasant day she had with him. Then she observes the castle and says goodbye, blushing. And Kunin is already there thinking that it was the first time he had extended his hand to someone. At which point the maid says that he was very chivalrous. And with that, Kunin approaches his history teacher, who also teaches him other subjects. And and asks her to give him etiquette lessons so that he can become a true gentleman worthy of Miraka. As night falls, Professor Jenny is frustrated because, despite using simple magic, she can't create multiple bubbles simultaneously. She realizes what she witnessed was elemental magic in its purest essence, and because he improved so quickly, she has nothing more to teach him. She then thinks that she should teach basic magic to a child, so it would be an easy job with a high salary. However, she doesn't give up and starts studying ways to teach him more. After all, he is too young for advanced magic, but he has already mastered the basics. And in the very next class, Jenny informs the boy that she has a different kind of class that day. And to her surprise, he says he's willing to listen to anything her beautiful voice utters. And so the lesson continues, and she explains that the magic he used simply produces water. However, they must analyze the nature of the magic, and the boy replies that it is to produce water, to make it float, and also to keep it in a spherical shape. And with that, Jenny says it was a splendid response, because the temperature, viscosity, components, color, shape, brightness, aroma, flavor, and various other things. If you analyze them, you'll see that there are more layers to the magic. And so the teacher creates two water bubbles and tells him to touch them. The boy notices that one is hot and the other cold, and Jenny tells him that despite being the same magic, it has many different ways of being used. And in this way, they create originality in each spell. In this case, it's a decisive individual trait for a Mudge, as well as a difference in talent. And with that, the boy understands that it's about altering the characteristics of magic. So he creates a water bubble and has his maid taste it. She says it tastes like apple, but he tells her it's actually plum. It looks like that dodgy tamarind juice that El Chavo used to sell. And the action surprised the teacher again. But Kunin says she has much to learn and that she will make her teacher proud. Back in his room, he reflects that he only knows scent and form, but has no concept of color. And without this knowledge, he wouldn't be able to cause magical changes. Therefore, he couldn't create eyes. But he is determined to see everything there is in the world. And the very next morning, he continues conducting experiments while talking to the maid, until the boy has an epiphany during a magic spell and says he saw something. But when questioned, he says he's not sure if that was seen. Then he explains that he thinks he was able to sense colors through magic. And so the maid explains the theory of colors to him, saying that there is light green apple and not just green. Surprisingly, the boy identifies that there are 3 red apples and 2 green ones in the bowl. And this information surprises his father. But the maid says that he is still very young, although he can distinguish colors. Then she goes on to say that the closer he gets, the better he can see, and it becomes clearer with touch. Then his father asks if he happens to be able to read books, to which the maid confirms that he can, since he can identify the color of the ink by tracing the outline with his finger. However, the boy still has to learn to read the letters, but he is fascinated by books and illustrated guides. Relieved, his father tells the maid that they should return to the main house after all. They are living separately because Kunin doesn't want anyone to feel bad, and besides, his wife could be taking care of the boy full-time. However, the maid denies this, saying that Kunin is about to undergo a major change, and this is happening every day, and that a change of environment could hinder his development. The father agrees, saying it's only a short distance between the houses, and that all the others have to do is want to visit the boy to see him. And so he concludes that he will leave the boy in her sole care, but she says that's no problem. After all, the salary is very good. Then the father smiles and says that her joy must be very good for his son. She doesn't miss the opportunity and says that more than compliments. She wants him to give her a raise, and the old man burst out laughing. And already in the backyard, the maid asks if he's going to start the experiment, and Kunin confirms and says it's just a matter of time. Professor Jenny's arrival, then he creates a giant red bubble above them, and soon the maid says it looks like eyes, the reds of a rabbit. Then the boy reveals that he can feel the color more strongly if he lets the magic grow stronger. A moment later, Kunin hears a female voice, and he says that that beautiful voice, like a bird singing, could only be that of his beloved mother. However, the boy's happiness causes him to lose control of his magic, resulting in the red bubble falling on Kunin and the maid in a suspenseful atmosphere. Kunin stretches out his hand and makes a frightening ghost-like voice at her, causing her to faint. His father immediately reprimands him, while Kunin's brother helps their mother. Kunin doesn't understand anything until the maid explains that the color red is also the color of human blood, and meanwhile his father reprimands them both, saying that he will not receive any allowance for 2 months, and Aiko will go 3 months without a salary, and this time it was Aiko who ended up fainting. All this while, Professor Jenny observed everything, and merely reflected on how frightening the boy's talent was, and how far he would be able to go, and also wondered if he would be able to achieve the highest title in the world, the Blue Wizard. 2 years later, Kunin is now 9 years old and can already read many important documents, so his father is already starting to make preparations to enroll him in school soon.